decisions of the board. So I've got 1307 here, and it's A through F. And item C, 1307C, is the applicable language. Administrative relief may be granted only where the board finds that the decision of the code enforcement officer or the planning board from which the appeal is made was, and this is the important language, clearly contrary to the specific provisions of this ordinance. Now, in prior years, the Maine Supreme Court has looked at language just like that and concluded that clearly contrary to the specific provisions of this ordinance is appellate review language. So not de novo. And you may ask, what's the difference? So de novo means you hold it again. There would be a brand new hearing, evidence, and so forth. If it's appellate, then you are simply reviewing the record that the planning board had, looking at the documents they had in terms of evidence, looking at the standards in Chapter 56, and then asking yourself whether the planning board's decision to grant a waiver was clearly contrary to the specific provisions of this ordinance. And we can get into what those provisions are in Chapter 9 later, but for now, it is an appellate review.
Thank you. And the reason I asked that is because if you don't like our decision here today, I wanted it clear the review we were doing. If I was thinking it was de novo, which means we start again, and we are you. We are the planning board. That's not our role. Our role is to simply ask, based on the findings made, are the findings supported by evidence in the record, first of all? That's one consideration. And second of all, if we find that the findings are supported with their overall conclusion clearly contrary to the specific provisions of the ordinance. So, do you understand how we're going to review this, sir?
I hope so.
Okay. Now, all right. All right.
I thank all the panelists for taking their time to show up to review this appeal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Now, lady in the front row, you were asking when I read it. Now I'm going to review the findings of the planning board. The first finding was the property is approximately 12.2 acre lot on 84 Beals Ave, tax and map lot, in the neighborhood and zoning district. Does anyone disagree with that finding? Sir, you as the appellant.
Yeah, I guess that relates to the zoning map, and I guess it's correct.
Okay. Legal interest in the property is demonstrated by submittal of deeds in the Hancock Registry of Deeds, and there's book 7151, page 979. I don't know what the heck those say, but I'll take their word for it. Does anyone dispute that the person that's developing this owns it? You don't dispute that they own it and they're trying to develop this place? Do you dispute that?
I'm sorry, you're asking me a question?
Yes, you are the appellant, so I'm trying to figure out what you agree on, and then I'm sure we'll find out what you disagree on right quick.
Oh,
right?
okay.
All right?
Yeah, well, these people own the property.
That's all I needed to hear. You agree with that. Third issue was the project is a major use site development and major subdivision. Do you agree with that? That's probably technical terms that the city uses, but
Yes.
okay, you agree with that one. 4, the application was submitted May 15th. Planning board reviewed the applicant and held a public hearing June 5th. The application for final review was approved. Do you agree with that? The two-step process is the application complete? Can we have a hearing? Right?
Yes, I agree with the time frames that you just mentioned and what went on. As you know from my appeal, part of the situation is that, in fact,
No. Hang on. I don't mean to be rude.
In their application.
Okay, I'm not trying to be rude to you.
That's a downstream issue for our discussion.
All right, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but if we talk over each other, we're not gonna get through this, because I'm always louder. All right?
Yeah.
All right?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Now, here's where I think we're gonna get some hot discussions, okay? The planning board found that granting a waiver from the city's site distance standard to instead meet the DOT standard still provided sufficient safety for drivers based on information provided by the appellant's traffic engineer, the city police, and the completion of a site visit, which I understand the actual Board of Appeals, not Board of Appeals, your board actually went and took site distances and saw the site all together with the city people. You don't agree with that, do you?
I do, that's correct, I do
All right.
not agree.
This is your opportunity to bless us with your opinion as to why this variance should not have been granted. I will not cut you off unless you start roaming, and it's, okay? And you can say, as long as you stick to the point and tell us what's wrong here, you'll be fine, okay?
Okay, well, of course, these are issues I addressed very specifically in the appeal.
Yes.
And I've been very hard-nosed in the appeal. I've tried to keep this appeal strictly to the specific sections of Chapter 56, Article 9, that in fact they've waived in order to do this. And it's not just some simple wave the hands waiver. They've in fact waived a dozen different sections of Article 9. And one of the things that you just read here, I disagree with the whole site distance situation, and I'll tell you why. The traffic engineer, in keeping with what the state does, has evaluated the site distance only in the horizontal plane at a level like 9 feet above High Street. Neither she nor the state takes into account the visibility issues because of the vertical difference between the horizontal sight line that she's using, horizontal sight plane, I should say, that she's using, and the actual vertical sight situation in that intersection. The fact of the matter is that for right turn traffic, which is the bulk of the traffic turning from High Street into Beals Avenue, the turning vehicle has no visibility of this driveway, and a car in this driveway has no visibility of such a turning vehicle until that vehicle is actually coming up the slope at them. And also, at high traffic times, the cars coming up the slope tend to be platooning. There's one right behind another. There are other problems here with respect to that visibility and with respect to what really goes on there. If you've got exiting traffic on a High Street, then there's only room between the High Street and the railroad track for one car, and a second car would have to stop before the railroad tracks, which would in fact block exit and visibility in that direction for the anybody out of that driveway. And so, and I don't believe that, as I made the comment in here, from what we see, the police drive through our street maybe once a month and just don't have any experience whatsoever with the safety situation on Beals Avenue to start with. And again, this is, detailed in my appeal. But Beals Avenue is narrow 2 lanes of pavement. There are no sidewalks, no shoulders, so you have pedestrians and kids and any workmen with their vehicles parked there, mowers, mowing trailers, delivery vehicles are along that street all the time. So the only way you can get down the street is to in fact go is to pull into the opposing lane to avoid everything that's going on there. And the street itself, this is my representation, is that under the table of section in Article 9, that the actual level of service on that street is an E, as in Edward. You might argue it's a D, as in dog, but clearly the Article 9 clearly, that section clearly prohibits bringing in another increasing the traffic level there by 27% with this driveway. And also, by the way, this is classified under the state system as a rural road because of the the width of it and so forth. But in fact, it's not just some local access road. The fact of the matter is that while this is a level E road, part of the reason it's that is because of the amount of bypass traffic that goes through there. This is in fact an arterial that takes a lot of traffic load off of the High Street, Main Street traffic light. And by the way, I looked in detail at the so-called state traffic counts, and I could not extract a traffic count from them as for how much total traffic they see turning from High Street onto Main Street. But clearly, in order to avoid the congestion and delay that's perennial with that intersection, we are an arterial for 600 cars a day that bypass that by coming through our street. And they do in fact cause congestion on our street beyond the issues of just getting through. They do back up down at the Main Street Main Street exit. They do get in line down there to get out because visibility is bad on that end of the street also. And so you have them platooning coming in and you have them backing up down there, all of which I believe contributes to classifying this as an E-level level of service on that street. And all of this was not considered by the traffic engineer, or the planning board just walked away from it effectively. There are things that I've addressed where they don't address these. They don't say we're waiving a certain section here, but they in fact, de facto, actually waive a dozen sections of this safety code. There are kind of two separate issues here. One is that there's Beals Avenue itself, without this access way, is not not a great street, and that's in the safety standpoint. And then adding the traffic from this driveway will exacerbate the problem, cause operational issues at High Street, and open it up wide open for accident situation there, both because of the lack of visibility and also the lack of time frame. One point I'll call to your attention is that down on the page 3, I think it is,
Yep.
I talk about the human factors here. And by the way, I have some expertise in this from designing weapons and weapons delivery systems for aircraft. That what happens is that there's actually 6 different things going on here that somebody exiting the driveway has to understand. And for this, I'll bore you here, I'm sorry, but
Take your time.
don't forget,
Take your time.
pardon?
Take your time.
Okay, don't forget that we have an abutting driveway, Partridge's driveway on one side, and we have the railroad tracks on the other side, and this is sandwiched in between them with effectively no real separation. So somebody trying to exit from the access way has to be aware of the traffic in the abutting Partridge driveway. They have to be aware of occupancy of the lane coming from the right, traffic approaching up from Beals Avenue on the right, and they have to understand whether that traffic is turning into the access way itself or is exiting to High Street with stopping at the traffic sign. Vehicles in the third lane on a High Street, they're making a left turn into Beals Avenue, and they can't see those, can't see the left turn lane, left turn signal probably until that vehicle actually, the traffic clears in the near lanes, and the traffic actually, that vehicle is actually making us turn, which in a way, which makes it almost as dangerous as the vehicles making a right turn off of High Street. Then you have the train tracks and anything that's abutting going on there. And you have the vehicles, as we've discussed before, the vehicles that are on the rise coming up from High Street at a rate of, say, 1 per minute during rush hour. And it frequently is a continuous stream. So you have 6 different directions here of which somebody trying to exit the driveway has to understand. And they have to understand this, have to remake this decision every few seconds. And they're likely to be sitting there, distracted by their cell phones or media going on, or whatever it is. But the point is that they have 6 things they have to accommodate mentally in order to make the decision of whether they can safely get out of that driveway. And in my experience with this multiple action situation is that it just doesn't work. And that what happens is eventually they get distracted, they get mental overload, and they make bad decisions. Namely, they exit when they shouldn't be exiting, and whammo, that's the end of that. So, this is an issue that never came up in any of the things at all, that just the nature of human nature of people trying to get out of that driveway is setting you up for problems, okay? Besides the fact that we already have various waiver things which have been effective, de facto enacted by the planning board without, without specifically enacting one or another. There's an interesting omission here in the safety code. Most places, in my experience with this kind of code, have a curb cut limit in the in their safety code. That means you can't have two driveways within the curb cut distance, and by the way, the distance is typically either 80 or 100 feet. And here we're talking about being right next door, not just 80 feet away. We're talking about being maybe 8 feet away, okay? So if we had a curb cut ordinance, like a lot of places do, then this driveway would just plain be banned by the curb cut ordinance. There's just no way you could put another driveway in there where this one is. But that's not in your curb cut, but just a side observation that I'll make about our safety ordinance here. So basically, what I've addressed here is kind of two sets of, if you want to separate them mentally, two sets of problems. One is the way Beals Avenue is without this access way coming in is not a safe situation to start with, okay? And then you add this additional traffic from this access way. And it's a driveway, but access way is what the code calls it, so.
Can I stop you right there?
And my PC doesn't like access way. Every
Can I
time I
stop
put
you right
access
there?
way in it,
Hello?
I'm making a spelling error.
Hello.
So
Can I stop you
then
right
you
there?
have the additional safety issues brought about by this. And
Can I- hey,
you know,
sir.
the first one you
Sir!
even if people could
Hang on,
safely
hang on,
access
I got a question.
exit this driveway, the fact of the matter is that another increase in traffic, a 27% increase in traffic on Beals Avenue, which is unsafe to start with.
Hey, sir, can I interrupt you just for a
further-
second?
Further increases in the lack of safety there.
Hey, sir, may I interrupt you
yeah.
just, I have a question. Have you
Sure.
seen the traffic summary prepared by the engineer and the numbers that they proposed that will impact Beals Avenue and this intersection? Have you seen those numbers?
Yeah, I'm saying yes, indeed. They would provide
Have you seen the numbers?
not just an inappropriate, but an illegal, because there's a 500 vehicle limit here.
Have
in
you
one of
seen the
waivers.
numbers the engineer proposed?
Yeah,
Do you dispute those numbers?
I dispute them to some extent.
What extent do you dispute them?
I forget their exact numbers, but, you know,
The summary
I'm not
I'll read
way
this.
off.
Their summary recommendation says the 39 dwelling unit are expected to generate 16 to 22 one-way trips in peak hours. The level of traffic should not have a significant impact off-site. Given this traffic level, the traffic movement permit is not required by the MDOT. Do you agree with that assertion by the engineer? He's saying there's
No, I
too
do
little
not.
traffic.
I don't agree in the quantity of, number one, I don't agree with the quantity, and number two, I don't agree with that it's not gonna have an effect.
Did you challenge the engineer when he was at the planning board? Did you question him?
I questioned somewhat, but I had problems, the plan, the
Did you give him a good old-fashioned grilling?
yeah, the microphone for where they would sit, the traffic engineer would sit there to talk, was not picking up well, and so I'll be honest, I didn't hear the full discussion that she had of it, okay?
But have you seen the engineer's report on traffic data that they use and gave to the city?
I saw this 200-page report that was referred to earlier.
It goes on and on and on and on and on, right?
Yeah, it goes on and on and on forever.
But the city,
And all you do is, it's like a computer game, all you do is you keep pressing the button and you get another printout.
all right, but our job here is to see,
And they're worthless, by the way.
all right, our job here is to see what the planning board got for information when they made their decision. And I want to know, do you agree with what they got or do you disagree with it? Because if you disagree with it, do you have anything that you have that contradicts what they submitted, that you did in fact submit to the planning board for consideration?
Yeah.
Did you give them anything?
I-
Did you give them your own
Yeah,
traffic study? I mean, you live
hear
there.
you, but I can't remember for sure
I can answer.
what number I had submitted, what
We can
numbers I had talked about, planning board. But one thing we talked about, one thing at least I talked about, was that I thought their estimate on the nature of what they were, who they are trying to sell these condos to, that this was gonna relate to, gonna provide a higher traffic level than what their estimate is. Namely, I came at it this way, that they're looking at doing affordable living, affordable homes for, and it's typically, they're gonna be, let's say, 2 and 3 family occupancy. When I look at the history of Ellsworth, the Ellsworth history on the census, I see that the average owned property in Ellsworth is occupied by, I think it's 3 people.
Yep.
Okay? 2 and some big fraction. And so what you're looking at here is a mother and a father. These are people that now, these are affordable living. So you've got mother and father both working, and then you've got one kid that going to school. And you get, so the mother and father each make 1 trip a day to work, and then one of them makes another round trip for after-school activities for the kid. So that's 3 trips, that's 3 round trips, or 6 vehicle trips on Beals Avenue per unit, or results in 180 trips on Beals Avenue, an increase of 180 over the known 600, was it 600?
Well, their study seemed to suggest 16 to 22 one-way trips at peak hours. And I'm not disputing your math that overall there would be, let's say, of 39 buildings, somebody's always coming and going. But
That's right.
their numbers seem to be low, suggesting that this wouldn't have a significant impact on Beals Avenue at all. That's their point. Do you agree with that assertion?
No, I don't.
All right. Do you have
Don't
any?
forget what you just said was, while we count this as the all-day traffic, the fact of the matter is that the bulk of it's going to occur around rush hours, and probably even biased toward afternoon rush hour.
Okay. Do you have anything more you want to say on the traffic issue? Because I've read your submission 3 times, and I kind of like it. I wish they were all like this. But the numbers that the planning board used are the reason a variance was granted, and that's why I keep asking you, do you have anything that contradicts the engineers in their numbers? Because I'm going to ask the planning board people, and Mr. Grant specifically, when it's their turn, why they use these numbers, or was there any other source of information? And why aren't you, I'm going to ask them, why aren't you right? Okay? So I'm trying to set them up and you to have a good record as to what you think the numbers should be and why we should grant you the relief that you are seeking. So if you go with my flow here, I'm trying to make it so you put in the record what you think the true numbers are, and you can contest what the planning board did appropriately. Okay?
At what point do
Yeah.
you get to speak?
If I open it up. Thank you.
I would just point out one thing. It's the 3 to 6 p.m. rush hour time in the afternoon is the time when most of the, there's a concentration of traffic. And I did not have these numbers at the time of the planning board meeting, but I later found that the one traffic measurement, independent of them, one traffic measurement had 243 vehicles going through there in that time frame. And I personally did a check on that in the current time frame, because that's data's several years old. And what I found was 252. So we're talking about 250 vehicles going through at rush hour time frame, or half the, close to half the traffic that turns onto Beals Avenue from High Street.
Well, did you ever find
So
any
if we
suggestion that the
Half of the,
city was,
I'm
did you ever look into a suggestion that the city is contemplating shutting off traffic to Beals Avenue from High Street at some point in the near future?
listen, we on Beals Avenue have faced that issue a number of times over the years, and we continue to be opposed to it, be totally opposed to it. And that's a different fight to be had, and I think anybody who assumes that would happen is just should keep their face shut, okay? Because we on Beals Avenue are not going to tolerate. You have to keep in mind, what is Beals Avenue? It has a very central location. It's one of the most valuable streets in the city with respect to the housing on it. It's all single family, expensive homes. And part of the value of those homes is the close the near close in-town location of that street, while still being somewhat isolated. But part of the value, and it's a real part of the value, is that that street has direct access to the businesses on Main Street and to the businesses on High Street. And if that High Street intersection was closed, then we would be inconvenienced by having to drive much of a mile further around to get to High Street. It clearly would reduce the value of properties on Beals Avenue.
All right, so let me ask you
we're
this.
absolutely opposed to that closing.
Let me-
And you can be forewarned, that's a battle that you're gonna have downstream if you actually propose it.
All right, well, right now, I think everyone in this room is familiar with Beals Avenue, particularly at 4 to 5 on a nice summer day. And my office is on High Street. You just think that these 39 cars, up to 16 to 22 one-way trips is an overload of this intersection. Bottom line on the traffic count, that's your position, and you think it's not fair. I mean, I get this, but I'm trying to establish your position, so if we rule for or against you and somebody says, I want to appeal, I have your position on the record, clearly. Been doing this
Okay.
as a lawyer for 32 years, and trust me, done a lot of trials and know what the record should look like. But I want your comment. Now, I want to switch gears from traffic studies to the line. The big issue was the line sight distance. Is that what it's called?
Sight distance.
Sight distance. Now, I understand, hang on, I understand that the planning board itself actually went with Robert Grant and Matthew Williams, who's our city planner. Robert Grant's a code enforcement officer, and took measurements. Were you aware of that?
I am aware of that, yes.
All right, and they presented that evidence to the planning board, right? The planning board's with them making measurements. Were you part of the site, did you go with them too?
No, I did not. I'm handicapped, so I couldn't go to
All right.
such a thing.
Well, I'm told that that's where they come up with their numbers, okay? Along with another source. Did you dispute at the time the measurements they came up with in person, or any other way? Because that seems
Yes,
to
I
be the
did.
reason
Yes.
this was
I
granted.
certainly did at the planning board, and the reason I did was, the logic that I did was that, again, these were measurements in the horizontal plane at the level of site of the required levels, 3.5 feet above the driveway height. And while I would, looking off to the west, you could see forever at that level. And so the question
That
becomes,
west meaning towards Bar Harbor, right?
what visibility do you have in the vertical plane, not in the horizontal plane? And that's what I disputed. That was, in fact, you have to consider the visibility limits in the vertical plane, not the horizontal plane, and that shows that those measurements, there's the same problem with the traffic engineers' work, that they just weren't reflective of the real situation regarding the interaction between traffic, Beals Avenue traffic, and people trying to exit this driveway.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you know the standard the city was supposed to use? What line sight distance were they supposed to come up with to approve this variance? Or even if it wasn't a variance, what was the appellant's, you're the appellant here, but the people asking for this, what did they have to show? Do you know?
Yeah, well, the standard for quote-unquote sight distance used by the state and the traffic engineer is the horizontal plane sight distance, okay?
Yep.
And my objection to that is that that standard is fundamentally erred in this case. That, in fact, the real problem lies in the lack of vertical sight distance rather than horizontal sight distance. And while, yes, the horizontal sight distance doesn't meet the spec either, but that's immaterial.
All right.
And because, as far as I'm concerned, it's immaterial because the problem is really, the major problem is generated by the lack of sight distance in the vertical direction here, in that the bulk of the traffic turning at that intersection makes a right turn from High Street onto Beals Avenue. And it has no visibility of anybody in that driveway before it makes the turn or when it's making the turn, when it's coming up that 20% slope. And I remind you that when you're on that kind of slope, if you haven't driven it, I remind you that your front hood of your vehicle is 4 foot higher than the back end, and it completely blocks your view forward until you get up over the top. And when
All right, well, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there.
Somebody
Let me stop you there. I have another question. Sir, I have a question. Sir,
they can't see you either until you're coming up that slope.
I want to ask a question. You're talking about traffic turning right from High Street going up on Beals Avenue. The issue in this variance concerns how much traffic this project is going to dump on that intersection coming out. And to some extent, how much traffic will be going in because of this project. But the real issue is, how much traffic is we going to dump in? Are the line sight distances? You come out of this, let's say the project goes forward. They come out, you get to the intersection, you're coming out of the project, you turn left, you're right on the top of the hill, and I know that there's a height distance, and I've taken out the front of a car there before, because you're going too fast, you hit the boom, and you go up over there, everyone hits boom. That's a legal term, by the way. And you go up 4 or 5 feet. I know that, but are you fighting over the traffic turning left or right onto Beals Avenue, or the traffic coming out of the project itself? Is that your line of sight problem when you're coming out and taking a left or a right?
Don't forget, traffic on Beals Avenue, these people making the right turn onto Beals Avenue, have the right of way. And people coming out of that driveway have to wait for them. And they have the thing is that people coming out of that driveway can't see people making the right turn off of High Street until that vehicle is actually coming up the hill,
Okay, all right, so.
which means it's essentially right on top of them.
All right, how close were the calculations by the city and the person applying to the standard that they had to meet? Do you know what the line sight distance they had to meet was to get approval here? And because
Well,
a variance was granted, so,
It depends. Under the Ellsworth code, it's 250 feet.
right,
The state rules give you a few foot reduction on that, but nothing's, that in this case is significant.
all right. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put you on hold and ask you to mute yourself. And I'm gonna give the city an opportunity to tell us what they use for numbers, what they use for line sight distance, and why they granted this variance. You will have a chance to rebut them, and then counterpoint until I get tired of it. And then I'm gonna ask the board, do we wanna open this up for public comment? This is a direct appeal by one person. Typically, people appealing are the ones we listen to. There are people in the audience that wanna talk, and they're not actually parties, but they are because they live there. So we'll have to make that decision whether they can talk collectively. That's the way these things go. You're charring at the bit, I see you, but that's the way these appeals go. So I'm turning it over to the city. I want to ask Robert Grant why he screwed this up and why he issued this to mess up Beals Avenue.
He didn't.
Robert, please explain why this variance was granted.
Okay.
Well, what you proposed and supported it before the gentleman on the end and his board.
What's that?
They work for the city, you're on the planning board.
That's wrong, that's right.
So I want to hear why people from the city, i.e. Robert Grant, who is the code enforcement officer, and Matthew Williams supported the notion that this should be granted by your board. You may have a chance to, actually, you're the board, I'm not going to ask you why you decided this. I just want the facts on the record as to what came through. We got your findings, okay? So, Robert, how come you screwed this up?
Wow. That's the debate, isn't it?
Right.
Matt and I took the board out to Beals Avenue and we looked at the site distance. Matt took a measuring wheel down and how far did we get? 200 and...
So to the right, out of the driveway to the new development, we measured about 211 feet of site distance, that direction, and then to the
All right, now listen, here's the way it's going to go. When one of you talks, when you read a record, it's just words, blah, 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 blah. And nothing worse than a record of two people talking and nobody identify themselves. So one of you's gonna talk at a time, then they're gonna say, this is Matt, I'm talking, and you're gonna deliver what you wanna say. And then you're gonna say, this is Robert, and we'll know it's Robert Grant. But if you don't identify yourself on this record when you're talking, I'm gonna get ugly.
All right. Do walkie-talkie talk.
That's what judges say. So, Robert, I want to hear you first, and then we'll switch to what Matthew.
Okay. So, this is Robert Grant. Matthew and I took the board to Beals Avenue, to the site where this development will put the driveway in. And we set up the approximate location of where it will be, and then Matthew walked down Beals Avenue, and we measured it, and as far as we could go until we lost sight of him, and it was around 214, 15 feet.
Were you walking on Beals Avenue or High Street?
Beals Avenue. We walked down, he walked down Beals Avenue, Matthew did,
All right.
and we waited until we could no longer see him when we yelled
Where
down
were you
to him.
standing?
At where the approximately where that driveway will be created, should it be allowed.
All right, so you're up over the hump You're on, right
Yes,
where the
right,
map?
right in front of John Partridge's house where the driveway will go if it is allowed.
Okay, so that's where the line of sight had to be taken.
Correct,
Looking down Beals Avenue.
correct.
All right, so go, now I get that cleared, go
Okay.
forward.
So it was 214 feet or so, 15 feet, something like that. I don't recall the exact number now, but that's what it
What's the
was.
standard that had to be approved?
For the waiver, the state of Maine requires 200 feet at 25 miles an hour, and that's what the speed limit is on Beals Avenue. So they require 200.
So your
The state.
measurement exceeded
Correct.
the amount of
It
line.
was actually, I
Hold
believe-
on a minute, what does the city require?
It's 10, I'm gonna read it. A site distance of 10 feet for each mile per hour of the posted speed limit shall be maintained or provided. For example, a 50 mile per hour posted road will require 500 feet of sight distance. So Beals, under the city standard, require 250 feet.
Thank you.
And you don't measure to the right towards High Street?
Yeah,
We,
both
we
ways.
we didn't, we
Both
didn't,
ways,
we didn't really have a way to do that, say, well, yes, but I mean, as far as the vertical plane,
So that's what he's,
correct.
okay.
Um,
But you did measure, you did the same test going right from that point of sight?
Sorry, Matthew Williams, city planner. We measured to the right, which goes further down Beals Avenue from the driveway, and we measured
Yeah.
to the left, which goes towards High Street.
How far did you get on the left?
I measured to the top of the hill was about 73 feet, and the engineer had proposed it's about 85 feet to the actual travel lanes on High Street, which would be about right if you take from the top of the hill down the hill.
Yeah.
All right, so did your measurements get within the distances you're supposed to have?
So, for the city's requirements, no, which is why they were requesting a waiver. So for both directions, you would want 250 feet to meet the city's standard. And so that's why the applicant was requesting a waiver down to MDOT, site distance safety standard. So it's not, willy-nilly, they were requesting to just a different safety standard.
What DOT's is 200, would be 200?
No, so for, to the right, going down Beals Avenue further would be 200 feet. But they also have a provision for corner lots, so they're side lots off of arterial roads, which would be High Street, which they requested 100 feet is the site distance for corner lots, and that's
So they were
actually.
still short,
So they're still short, but not
as much.
as much.
So 100 going left, and what did your measurement show?
The top of the hill was 73, and the engineer said it was 85.
So which was it?
It was 85 to the travel lanes of High Street.
And going down Beals Avenue, you're supposed to have 250, and you got how much?
Before the state, you need 200. And
State required MDOT standard.
yes,
City standard was 250.
yes.
All right, any question?
Does the city council have to approve the difference between the state and the city? Or can the planning board change?
So, the planning board has the power to grant the waiver, and so this is information that the applicant was using to request the waiver. There's no full approval to change the site distance standards for the city in this. It's for this particular project, a waiver for one project.
So you would agree that the city standards has not been met in either left direction or right direction?
Correct.
And the left going down Beals Avenue is 211, and you need 250.
Yes.
So those were findings that could have been made by the board. And then going left, you need, how much do you need, 100 feet?
For the city standard, you'd still need 250.
250 going left,
Yes.
and you got 83?
Or 85, yes.
No, but you said there was because of the corner.
That's a state standard.
Yeah,
so-
you could, okay, but the city still requires 250, even on a corner lot, they don't.
So you're sitting at the end of their proposed road, you're supposed to be able to see 250 feet to your left, and you can only see 83.
Yes.
Yeah,
Seems like that's a significant difference.
yeah, I would think.
Well, they're requesting a waiver, so you go into that site visit knowing what the standard of the waiver is, and it's still a safety standard used by a creditable government source.
Okay? Now, that was the site distance numbers and issues that was presented to the board.
Yes.
Matthew, right? And Robert, you agree with that? And those are the numbers the planning board, please, the record gets clogged when you talk.
Sorry.
All these things pick up things, and it reads like a garbled. And I've had enough of these transcripts to know. So there's the sight distance issue. So 250, and you don't meet it to the left, and 250, but you don't meet it to the right.
Correct.
And therefore, the variance was granted for the sight distance. Now, the traffic numbers, these didn't bother me so much. What'd you guys take into consideration with the traffic numbers?
Yep, so Matthew Williams, city planner again. We took into consideration mostly the numbers collected by the engineer for the project. It's just generally standard. They're required to do a traffic study for the project and the surrounding area. They used multiple sources such as DOT counters. This project in particular did live counts as well on the road. And so that's where most of the city's numbers came from. The board also had not as kind of helpful, but rough numbers from a 2019 police speed, what do you call it, speed counter, speed measurement device that was on Beals Avenue that year. So it's a couple years old, and it didn't signify where traffic was going. It measured in both directions and just kind of counted how many traffic trips happened on that road in both directions.
Okay. Were there any other numbers besides what the traffic guy gave you?
For traffic counts, I don't believe so.
Were those considered accurate? Did you guys consider them accurate? Did you say that?
Oh, but yes, I mean, another thing that feeds these types of studies is ITE. I don't remember what that stands for, but it's a traffic engineers group that does like counts for different uses. So like this type of housing, or if you build a different type of development, there's like pre-assessed like estimated traffic counts if you don't have time to go.
Did Head of Fine actually go out there and count?
I wasn't Head of Fine, they hired Sewell, but Sewell did, yes.
Did Sewell go out there and count?
Yes.
And did they do all hours of the day and night and get a good accurate reading on Beals Avenue?
I don't think they did all hours of the day and night, but they stayed at peak. They went and did live counts for the peak hours and throughout the day.
All right, obviously at 3 a.m.
Right.
Nobody gives a damn, right? Well, they do, if you're loud. But peak hours, they nailed it pretty good. Did you feel that their study adequately proposed numbers that you could work with?
I felt they proposed numbers we could work with. It was during a peak time of the year, so it wasn't like it was in the middle of winter when no cars would be traveling either. You know, every day is different, so or they did suggest that maybe there were 0 cars turning left off of High Street. I was like, all right, maybe there would have been 1 or 2, but I thought that they were workable numbers.
Okay. What is the stand for granting a waiver?
So for the site distance standard, or for safety site distance, the waiver requirement reads that the planning board may lower the safety site distance if an engineer can provide adequate documentation that a shorter site distance will provide adequate safety, and following recommendation by the city planner in consultation with the Ellsworth Police Chief and the Ellsworth Code Enforcement Officer.
All right, so the police chief signed off.
Yes.
That was part of the process. And the code enforcement officer, we've heard his reasoning here. And then how do we know safety standard is met? That's just a fudge number, that's a guess.
Well, yes, it's that there will be that the engineers provide that there will be adequate safety, and so, you know, doing the site visit itself, you could see from the top of the hill that so the site distance is measured for vehicles coming out of the new access way. So if you're on High Street, the developer doesn't have to consider site distance for a car turning onto a road that's your development's on. It's just the cars coming out of your development.
Okay.
And
All right, I just want to address, 2 other findings made by the board was the lighting standards. We're not here to fight those, that's number 6. And number 7, approval of water pressure, if it drops. That, you're not here contesting that, are you, sir? You're not contesting,
Pardon?
you're not contesting findings concerning the lighting, and you're not contesting findings concerning the water pressure issue, right?
Yeah, I did not, I'm only considering safety issues here. Yes, there's no question. We on Beals Avenue still have a real this waiver on the water pressure discussion.
It wasn't, well, no, listen.
We observe on a continual basis a wide variation in water pressure, and that's a different issue. But we do not believe that the decision was that, well, they'll have to build their fire system, and then they'll have to run it full blast, and we'll see if we get a drop in pressure on Beals Avenue.
All right, well, listen, you didn't.
We think it's,
Sir,
that's, you know,
sir.
that's not in here.
Sir, you did not raise it in your brief.
That's right.
And you didn't
I did
raise it.
not.
So I'm gonna consider those waived. We're not here to fight over lighting or water pressure. If you could increase the water pressure at my house on Park Street, I'd love you dearly. However, those are not issues we're here to fight, correct?
That's correct. I
All right.
very hard-nosed. I restricted this appeal strictly to the safety code issues. I did not, we certainly have, we on Beals Avenue certainly have other issues with this project, but no, I'm not, I did not address any of those in here.
Okay, now, I wanna give the city one more chance to, do you have anything you wanna add? We got your numbers, we got what you're thinking, we got the decision of the planning board. Anything else you wanna add to this appeal?
I'll just add, Matthew Williams, city planner, again, that in discussion with the police chief, there was a suggestion that there was some vegetation that can block a little bit of the line of sight in both directions. So to the left, you have some trees that are in the right of way.
Scrubs.
Shrubs, yeah, in the right of way of the, some of it might be trees, but in the railroad. And then, well, I think it's on private property, though there are some vegetation to the right. And so I'm in conversations with DOT to have the vegetation to the left cleared out, so there is more line of sight towards High Street.
Playing the devil's advocate, I wanna ask, was the site plan, did they consider other accesses to this? Beals Avenue is a hot topic, and that whole area is gonna be developed eventually, and the traffic ain't going down. Did they look at other alternative access routes, particularly in light of, there's a courthouse probably gonna be built up there, close to it. Is there any access they could come out a different way, dump it into Merrill's Light and live another day? Is that been considered by these appellants, these applicants?
Yes, Matt Williams, city planner. Yes, so one alternative was potentially trying to cut a road through to the light at Merrill, but the conversations with that landowner, as a lot of people have, with development in that area, found out kind of go nowhere, because the cost of the land is presented as exorbitant.
It's wet.
I don't know exactly what the number is, but I hear from a lot of people that it's just not worth the money just to build a road, so.
Is this their only option?
Essentially,
Will they ask that?
yeah, well, yes, I did have conversations with them leading up.
All right, I'm gonna ask the board, I've been hogging, and you guys must have some questions from either the gentleman on the screen or other people that you need to have answered, so.
Yeah,
Steve?
Steve Shea here.
Steve's going first.
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
That's right.
No,
Beauty before age.
So, in this traffic study that Sewell did they actually address site distances?
Yes.
And what, I couldn't find any conclusion in that.
It's on page 7 to page 8, I can read it off exactly if you'd like, but they do address.
That's not from Sewell, that's from Hedifon.
Maybe I just forgot who wrote up the summary of this, but, right, this is from Sewell. Right, it's the same, right, I got the same thing, so it is in this traffic report from Sewell.
What page is that on?
It's,
Page 9, Sewell.
Page 7 and 8.
Were their numbers the same as yours?
Probably not, because we had more in the PDF, but it's
So
on
in
page
that-
7 and 8 of the report.
In that, on page 7 and 8, did they actually address site distances?
Yes, there's a section called driveway site distance, where they go discuss the, how they collected the measurements for site distance, which follows the Ellsworth standard. Again, to Mr. Brooks's point, it's just the horizontal plane, not the vertical plane, but our ordinance only requires the horizontal plane. And it talks about the difference between what would be considered safe by the city standard, what's required typically, and then what the MDOT requires and why they would meet that standard.
What'd they conclude?
Do you just want me to read off the whole?
Yeah,
okay.
are their numbers, what you've already said, consistent with what you guys found?
Yeah, they did have a slightly different measurements when measuring from the site, some of
I
the
want the
site
record,
itself.
I need the record.
Yeah.
They're not, I want their numbers.
All right, so I'll just read off the whole thing. It's pretty short, actually. But one of the most important safety factors to consider for a project with limited trip generation such as this is sight distance from the access drive. This sight distance is measured 10 feet back from the edge of a travelway at a driver's eye height of 3.5 feet to an object height of 4.25 feet. The speed limit on Beals is unposted, but since it is an urban, well, it doesn't finish that sentence, but it would be considered 25 miles per hour. So it's a residential road, essentially. The city of Ellsworth sight distance requirement for 25 mile per hour facilities is 250 feet. Sewell measured sight distances from the proposed site drive and found the following. To the left, greater than 100 feet to High Street lanes. To the right, 205 restricted by landscaping. Sight distance to the left would be considered adequate since vehicles will be turning off High Street onto Beals Avenue at a slower rate of speed since the drive location provides approximately 85 feet of corner clearance from High Street, almost meeting Maine DOT's recommended corner clearance standard of 100 feet for drives onto major collectors and arterials. Sight distance to the right is restricted by landscaping on the opposite parcel given the curve in Beals Avenue. It is expected that vehicles are traveling at less than 25 miles per hour as they reach the site drive given the curve and upcoming stop condition at High Street. The 205 feet of available sight distance meets Maine DOT's entrance permit requirement of 200 feet for 25 mile per hour facilities. Given this, it is understood that the applicant will be requesting a waiver from the 250-foot city requirement down to the Maine DOT entrance permit requirement of 200 feet. Pruning and trimming of landscaping within the right-of-way is recommended to obtain as much sight distance as possible. This pruning should also occur periodically to maintain the sight distances into the future. It is important to note that no signage or landscaping should be located in the driveway site triangles, which would obscure or limit the driveway site distances in the future.
Thank you.
Now, this is on, isn't this report you're reading, head of Hines, in head of Hines, open letter, and he's quoting Sewell,
No, it's in the Sewell traffic report.
what you just read?
Yeah. Unless they copy and pasted, I might have copy and pasted it too onto something.
Well, I find the same language in head of Hines.
Yeah, so they might have just copy and pasted from Sewell's traffic report.
Bruce Sawyer, I have a question. Is there any difference on the standards from safety or engineering on a vertical plane compared to a horizontal plane?
In a technical sense, I don't know, I'm not sure that, again, all of our standards are measured on a horizontal plane, they don't discuss the vertical plane.
But you're not aware of any difference on a safety standard where you've got a different vertical plane?
Yeah, not in writing, not in our actual standards.
Was the difference in the vertical plane considered?
Slightly, I mean, again, not technically for the measurements, but again, because you're measuring the safety distance, sight distance from a vehicle exiting the development, they are flat on the horizontal plane.
Right.
It's the vehicles that would be coming up off of High Street that are on the vertical distance.
But what you quoted before that was the eye level of the driver, so that's obviously going to change when you've got a vertical component.
Right, but it's the eye level of the driver coming out of the development driveway, which is staying constant. It's not, they're not coming up the incline that High Street is, or off of High Street.
Can they see High Street when they come out of that development?
You can, if you stop and take to the left, you can see the top of the cars coming.
You can,
down High Street.
okay.
This is making this on.
Thank you.
Steve, any questions?
Only to the council. Our decision rests on if the planning board made a grievous error, some such. You read the language earlier. The ordinance allows the planning board quite a latitude of discretion to grant these waivers. What standard should we be measuring to see if that error was so grievous that it shouldn't have been made to start with?
That's a good question. So let me
See why I invited you?
have a crack at that. And the city planner did read off one of the standards, but in 904, it's a chapter that we're dealing, chapter 56, article 9, 904 talks about when the planning board can waive portions of the standards of this article. A is, the planning board may consider waivers if they will not result in a more adverse impact on public safety than the existing conditions. And so what, if you go to the decision again, in terms of findings of fact, they relied on the applicant's traffic engineer, the Ellsworth Police Department, and a completion of a site visit. So there's three things that they did, which led them to grant the waiver according to this written article. So I think you would first have to say, was it within their purview to grant a waiver, or, so far outside of their purview to grant a waiver, because doing so would create a more adverse impact on public safety than the existing conditions. That's one aspect.
Based
Second-
on just those three conversations?
Yes. The planning board shall state the reasons for any waiver or an alternative design in its decision, and I think you have this here, that they relied on the main DOT standards as opposed to their own city standards. Third, it says the alternative design standards proposed by the applicants must be compliant with sound engineering practice as reflected in publications by the main DOT, ADA, and so forth, and the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which the city planner mentioned before. And then fourth, and I think this is the important one, the planning board may grant necessary waivers of particular design standards for road construction or reconstruction where any of the following conditions exist within the project limits. The first one probably doesn't apply. Right-of-way width is insufficient to reconstruct the road to meet the standards, not applicable, we're not reconstructing a road. Physical limitations such as encroaching buildings or steep grades make construction with the appropriate design standards impractical. So is it impractical to meet the design standards? Well, we heard about vegetation and so forth. That seems implicit in what the planning board is doing, is saying, we measured it, there's curves, there's vegetation, so you can't meet the 250, but you can meet other engineering standards such as DOT. And then the next two don't apply. Traffic volumes are less than 400 average daily traffic, that is the case here. And the road service special use, but we're not dealing with special use. So I think those are the things you would be looking at to see if the planning board acted clearly contrary in granting this waiver.
Well, what did you say about D3, traffic volumes are less than 400 average daily traffic?
Yes, I'm talking about in the use itself.
Not considering the street, just out of that, just out of
Yeah,
that.
when you're looking at, traffic volumes are in that particular use, not nearby, because you could be on 95, and that
It
doesn't
says within the
apply.
project limits. What are the project limits?
Project limits are that site itself,
Not-
and as you enter and exit.
So basically, right where you were standing 10 feet off the street,
Mm-hmm.
any cars coming out,
So it'd have to be 400.
or left, no,
It would be for like a
More
use
than-
like Walmart that has
Out of-
400 trips
into the-
daily on it then.
Into the project? Is that what you're saying?
No, so I'm saying that if you look at the language of 904.2, traffic volumes are less than 400 average daily traffic, that would be a consideration for whether the planning board could grant a waiver.
What is that, it's 400?
I think if you look at the,
because there's more than 400 on Beals, based on the study, just not out of that project.
it's out of the project.
That's how they voted.
So in other words, is this so outrageous or not outrageous as the variance should have been granted?
That's the decision for you to make.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, here's what I'm gonna do. Would you like to add anything finally? I'll give you 3 minutes. To give us anything else that you forgot, want us to know, or haven't stated so far. And I'll give you more time if you're really going good. However, it's, there's a lot, Do you want to add anything more? Because I think we've got the numbers and how they granted this.
Yeah, I would, just to pick up on a comment that you just made, which I didn't address earlier, is the total vehicle, this is by this 2019 study, total vehicle traffic on Beals Avenue, 24 hours is 656 vehicles, and of which 243 or 250, to check my numbers, is during the peak hours of 3 to 6. But the important thing with respect to that total traffic volume is that under 9042D III, that puts a limit of 400 vehicles on that street, and they can't add this kind of traffic to it. That's a specific safety limit that's established by that particular section of 9. And I didn't hear an explicit addressing of that issue with respect to the waivers. And of course, I would say that I don't disagree that you could see over sort of 85 feet or so out there into High Street, but I disagree that that's the appropriate sight distance that you need to be talking about here, because even if you clear vegetation out of there, and let me just say this, with respect to the way the vegetation is now between where this driveway and the railroad tracks is, you do not have that kind of visibility from 10 feet back on the driveway, okay? From 10 feet back on the driveway, under the present conditions, you would not see somebody until making a right turn, until they actually were up the right turn. And even if you clear the vegetation, you wouldn't, while maybe you could see particularly trucks, the top of the vehicles on High Street in that near lane, you have no idea which ones of those are going to turn and which ones are going to go straight through. You know, that number is just 85 foot is just irrelevant. And a point on this 400 vehicle limit is that they never address that number for a waiver, and they're prohibited from making a waivers if they're going to add significant traffic into that 400 count. And you know, I would, with respect to my number 180 coming out of the driveway, you know, the bulk of that is going to be at rush hour too. It's going to add to the rush hour traffic and problems. Then there's one other thing here. You mentioned this new courthouse possibility, and it's clear that if in fact it really goes into High Street location, that the street they're going to have to put in there for that would be very, very close, just a few feet from this property, and would be much more attractive to this property than any other alternative. But with respect to, there was a serious omission in the Ellsworth LLC application, as we mentioned here, and they didn't discuss, by the way, the answer that I heard when they were asked about alternative access. The engineer on that gave a very flippant, no, we looked at it, which sounded like a bunch of BS. Didn't sound like any serious thing. But I do want to point out that under section 902.1C, they're required to show on their drawings any street that's within 600 feet of the project. And both Merrill Lane and Abram Way should have been shown on that project and discussed, and they were not. So the application itself was deficient in that respect.
Actually, sir,
thank you.
enough. There's a site map that shows all the roads within 600
Yeah,
feet.
I just have one more item, please. In closing, I again thank you all for showing up here and taking your time to hear this. I would like to point out, there's an elephant in the room on this, and that is that if you let all these waivers, of which there are a dozen, even if they didn't specify them all, there are a dozen de facto waivers here that they made. And if you permit that to go through, the elephant room, and the room is that then you have declared these waivers to be effectively invalid or at least questionable with respect to any future activity. And people can just go forward here and ignore the Ellsworth safety code. That, to me, is the elephant in the room on this. If you do not accept my appeal, do not approve my appeal, then you're opening that whole bag of worms about the ability in the future to enforce the Ellsworth safety code. And once again, thank you, Joe.
Can I ask you, is this an unusual request? I mean, we're here on the ones people complain about, but is this the norm to grant a variance like this?
Matt Williams, city planner. I wouldn't say it's the norm to grant a waiver like this. We don't get a request for site distance waiver generally. The corner lot and the way this is positioned is pretty unique to the geography of this site.
Is there any access, like Comfort Inn's right there, and can they go across the railroad tracks?
No.
Why?
They have to build a railroad crossing there.
That's about 200,000.
It's probably more than that.
Well, if it's a cost of business, it's a cost of business. Is it accessible
I will
so they don't have to go on Beals Avenue?
I will say, probably not the Comfort Inn because that's a parking lot. They'd probably have to find a way to connect to another road that's on the other side of the railroad tracks, which, again, they discussed potentially trying to tie in the Merrill Lane.
Well, I see on one of their site maps, there's Comfort Inn, and then there's the real estate people, and then there's L.O. Bean, and then there's some other, the grain feed business. Any way to connect a road out through there? I get it, cross a railroad track, you put in some money, you know? But that whole area strikes me as in play, and there's no access. And is anybody from the city exploring access to, look at the great big field up there, right? It's a great big field. Where is there? That's why, and then we get Cards Brook where you get all kinds of wet problems. Has anybody explored access? The city proposed putting roads in there so this area can be developed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a conversation right now around the potential relocation of the courthouse on a site off of Long Lane. And as part of that, I guess a greater vision could be a road that connects from High Street to Main Street. That would
We'd have to.
Right.
But this site, the way it is, the only access that is feasible for them cost-wise is Beals Avenue. And it, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking out loud, boy, that's a big dump. And I see why variances are granted, but, all right. I'm gonna ask, there's a lady, John, you wanna speak? You wanna talk? Do you wanna add your 2 cents worth?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear.
Would you like to address the board? This is the peanut gallery, as we call it. They're not appellants, however, they have voices, they're community, they're interested. Does anybody want to give their 3 minutes worth to the board? Raise your hand. 3 of you. I'll give you 3 minutes each. How's that? Is that okay with the board?
Yes.
We'll let him come back. We usually do this, when we did Walmart, we let everybody talk. It was, It was interesting. The pattern of the birds will be disrupted by the lights. I can.
I remember that.
Pattern of the birds. But I'd ask that you identify yourself. Obviously, I know John lives on Beals Avenue. I don't know where you two live, but just indicate your interest.
My name is Meryl Mass.
Hang on.
If you could have them come to the podium so we can hear them, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till
Yes,
Yes.
just want to give a reminder.
our friend comes back from taking care of business every day. Does the little lady in the back want to stop? Come on down. Public speaking 101.
Could I add just one
No.
comment there?
No,
On the-
no,
No,
no, no. We're at an impasse. We're gonna hear from some other people. And I'm not trying to be rude to you, but you've been hard of hearing, which has been interesting at most. And we've tried to get your attention at times. Are you all set?
Diabetes.
I get it. We waited for
Not a
you.
problem.
Thank you.
Not a problem. If you want to come up, state your name. 3 minutes is suggested if you need more.
Thank you. My name is Meryl Nass. I live on Beals Ave. Because I don't live within 250 feet of this property, I was not notified of this until very recently. I did go to the planning board office. I spoke with somebody there, but I was not told that there are already these documents that I should be reading, so I wasn't aware of them. I did, however, look up the rules, and when I look at 904.2, number C, I see that alternative design standards proposed by applicants must be compliant with sound engineering practices, and they give you 4 different possibilities of regulatory standards that might be applied. And nobody apparently took advantage of these 4 different standards that could have been used to deal with the 9-foot vertical distance in this area of the road. And so I don't think this has been a complete evaluation, and until that's done, there should not be a final decision. Thank you.
Anything else you want to say? John, come on down, I know you. That's the wonderful about small towns.
Well, I agree with Carl Brooks. He did a good job, I think, in his presentation. And he did a good job in a letter that he sent out to the folks on Beals Avenue, and I thank you, Carl, for that. Unfortunately, he's on the other end of the state tonight, could not be here. And I just want to point out a couple of things that he already did, because I think they're important. This is a 36-unit, I believe, condo proposed, is it not?
It is.
And that would obviously add probably well over 70 more vehicles going up and down the avenue, and that's a minimal number. And I think that, again, it's been explained already tonight, the street is narrow, there's no sidewalks, and it already takes a ton of traffic off High Street. I'll tell you, when that traffic starts backing up from the light on Main Street, up High Street, towards the other end of Beals, my end of Beals Avenue, there's a lot of folks that cut across there already.
Your house is right at where we're talking about.
All right, and, right, that's my dooryard. And in my mind, it would make a lot more sense for this project to go in where there's already a road started out by Merrill Furniture, that would go right into that property. I think it would make a whole lot more sense if that's considered in this. I just highlighted a couple of things here that, again, Carl had talked about. The As he puts it, the Beals Avenue is a premium street of high-value, single-family homes, which I think you would agree. And it's enhanced by its central location and its direct access to both Main Street and High Street. And again, as I've already mentioned, it does take a lot of traffic off of High Street, and it seems to flow pretty well now, but I cannot see how it possibly could if this project, or this part of this project, is right on the end of Beals Avenue. I don't see how it can even work. There's blind spots coming off of High Street. It's already been pointed out, I know, but when you go up the ramp, if that road comes out to this proposed new project, it's right there. And I think it's gonna cause problems on both Beals Avenue and on High Street. The other thing I just want to mention again, this is going to be an increase. Somebody mentioned 29%, and the increase that I have down here is 30, so we'll say 29% increase in traffic. That street just can't take all that much more traffic with what it's already doing, taking traffic off High Street, which is, to my knowledge anyway, nobody on Beals Avenue is opposed to what's happening now. That's fine. Get that traffic off of High Street, especially in the summertime. But to add this to it, it's going to be a mess. And again, I think the place for the access to this is somewhere else. I think out on High Street, out in the area of Merrill's and the bank. As I say, there's already a road started back in there, and it wouldn't be much further to go to this proposed new site. I think that's about all. Of course, water pressure and sewer and all of that has already been mentioned. That is a consideration too.
Park Street, remember, add pressure to Park Street.
What's that?
Add pressure to Park Street.
So that's, again, I don't want to drag this meeting out longer for folks that have already been sitting here a long time. But I think this really needs to have a hard look at it, and Beals Avenue is not the place for that road to go in. It really needs to go somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You, sir, step right up. Do you want to stand with him? Tell him what to do?
Ken Eaton, Beals Avenue. Ken Eaton, Beals Avenue.
Hi, Ken.
And just had a couple of quick points.
Gents.
I didn't know, but maybe the Fairgrounds Road might be an access point to the land, which is out behind, up Main Street a little farther on the right.
I know where she is.
Okay, and the second thing is, when they were doing the live counts for the traffic, one of them was on a Saturday, which no way reflects the normal traffic you have
Was it in
during the
summer
week.
though?
It was a couple of summers ago, because I spoke to the kid that was doing the clicking, sitting in a chair, and it was definitely a Saturday morning.
In the morning? I wouldn't.
Well, he was there all day, but, you know, it was a weekend day, which no way reflects the current level of traffic, even during the summer. And that's all I got.
Appreciate your comments. Does anybody else from the gallery wish to add their 2 cents worth to this discussion? Going once, going twice, and with a thumbs, John?
I just want to remark to what he just said. The Fairgrounds Road.
Could you come to the?
Come up to the
Great
podium.
idea. It's a good consideration, I think, to
All right.
get to that property. And again, as I've already said, out on High Street, by Merrill's is another. So I think-
Fairground Road would be a big expensive. I get it. All right, I'm gonna zero you in on why we're here. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? 1 minute closings, 1 minute additions from anybody? Sir?
Yes, just one comment to, at the very last part of your discussion, you brought up the cost issue. And let me point out that a drive from this property, from the buildings on this property to Merrill Lane or to Abram Way would be shorter than the drive construction they're proposing to get down to Beals Avenue. And so, the alternatives, if they may think they cost something, no, they aren't gonna cost as much. And with respect to crossing the railroads, I know Tom Chester well, and sure, there's gonna be some permitting process to cross the railroad, but I think Tom would be cooperative with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. City, last word, either one of you can, or both.
Matt Williams, State Planner, just more of a technical point. The reason that they're clicking on Saturdays is some of the key times to collect data for most traffic studies are peak Saturday hours, just for weekend traffic, then you pick a weekday that has peak days also, so they did the.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'm gonna close the evidence. Boom. Now, I'm gonna zero the board in on what I think the real issues is. A variance was granted. You've heard the facts upon which the variance was granted. I'll tell you, the traffic studies don't suggest that this is gonna be a huge amount of traffic, but you have your own independent conclusions on that. I just don't think that this is gonna be a significant traffic addition. What bothers me is our city Board of Appeals, not Board of Appeals, Planning Board, has granted a variance based on line sight distances that are not within what the city picked. The city picked 250, and they got 211 on one direction. That one's, I could live with. But the going left was 83 feet, and is 250, 200. Are we supporting the city's planning board to make such giant, and that's a big reprieve for a variance. And I'm interested in your thoughts on that, because I respect what the planning board does, I respect what the city does. But we, the catch-all people who have to say yes or no, if there's an appeal, have to make a determination of whether that's what we want our planning board doing. And whether that is what was the word? Contrary to the specific provisions, what was the other word?
Ordinance.
Ordinance, of the ordinance.
Clearly contrary.
Clearly contrary to the specific, the ordinance says 250. They're at 83. Is that clearly contrary? That's the legal issue here, period.
So they could have went back and got a variance for the difference in site to get that approved.
Well, no, they chose
No,
their
right.
entrance and exit and then sought to justify it with a variance.
Yeah.
You see what the difference is?
Without coming,
No, they went to the city, they went the right channels, they just said, we got a problem, can you fix it with a variance? And the variance was granted, but keep in mind, they're granting a 83 line of sight variance when the code says 250. Is that what we want?
Not only that, they relied on the state standards, it doesn't even meet the state standards.
right.
Your thoughts on this
Says
are
it
crucial.
almost meets the state standard, but, if you almost win in poker, it doesn't make much difference, does it?
No. So that's what you need to consider. So, are you guys ready to vote? Do you know what your opinions are? Do you want to talk about it more?
I'm
Well, I
reluctant
think we
to
should talk
second
about
guess the planning board who went to the site, made a visit, the staff recommendations.
Well, that's our job, Steve.
I'm just saying,
Good God.
my opinion
Well,
is not to second guess the planning board. They have a public
I
process.
don't think we are second guessing the plan.
No, we're applying a standard of law to a standard, and we're reviewing it and saying, is this right? Now, it's nothing against the developer, it's nothing against the planning board. Beals Avenue's in play, you know that. You know that. It's a hot potato when there's only one entrance and exit. And you're gonna see more of that land develop over time, you know it. But right now, this traffic study is asked for a variance and was given a variance based on those numbers. Is that what we want the city doing? That's why we're here. And even a tough decision, I don't care if you like or dislike, I get what you're saying, but it's a tough decision, you gotta make it.
I got other questions, though. There was language in the report from John DeLeo about the police department. Did they actually give you a written report?
No, they came to the site visit and I conferred with them on site.
Did they
It
give
wasn't
you a
John
written
DeLay, it was
report?
somebody else, right?
Well, John signed the action letter that talked about the.
Okay.
Did the police department, the police chief, ever actually in writing give you any report?
No, but I could get one for you.
Well, you could, but you didn't.
No.
Okay.
But I put in the actual
We have to
letter that
go
he
on
was
what's
consulted.
existing evidence at the time, not what you could do. Now, I think that the language in the engineer's report is pretty evasive. It talks about the right distance as being 250 feet down to, but it never addresses the left distance.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah.
I mean, the Mount William City Planner, it does address the left distance, but it just does
Where
so.
does it address the left?
In the paragraph that I read earlier from the report, page 7 and 8 of Sewell's traffic report, it discusses the site distance to the left will be considered adequate since vehicles will be turning off High Street on Beals Avenue at a slower rate of speed, and since the drive location provides approximately 85 feet of corner clearance from High Street, almost meeting Maine DOT's recommended corner clearance standard of 100 feet for drives on the major collectors and arterials.
That must be in Sewell's report.
It's in
It
this,
is in
Steve.
Sewell's
They
traffic
talked
report.
about left and right side, but they were at 83 feet going left from the end of the road, and they were at 200 and something going right.
11, I think, 211.
Right? The one that bothers me is the left one.
Yeah.
And that's a heck of a variance to grant.
Well, and also, one of the things that they were supposed to consider is vertical conditions. If you look at, I can't find it right now,
Was there discussion at the planning board about the left?
but on, in
the
Article
waiver?
904.2D2, it says physical limitations such as encroaching buildings or steep grades make construction within the appropriate design standards impractical.
Tim, you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just to clarify, 904.2D, so this sets out when the planning board can even have the authority to grant a waiver. The planning board doesn't have the authority to grant a waiver whenever it feels like.
Right.
It says it may grant the necessary waiver of a particular design standard for road construction or reconstruction when any of the following conditions exist within the project limits. So there's 4 situations when the planning board can even consider a waiver. And number 2 is physical limitations such as encroaching buildings or steep grades make construction within the appropriate design standards impractical. And I think what you heard tonight and what you see in the record is that either way, on the left, you're heading towards High Street, you've got a curve if you're looking to the right. So there's physical limitations with that exit and entrance, which would give the authority of the planning board to consider a waiver. You don't, the 400 average daily traffic, you don't need all the standards to be able to consider a waiver, you just need one, which they had. Now, then the second question is, was it appropriate, was it clearly contrary, was it outside of their purview to do that? And then I think you're looking under C, which is alternative design standards proposed by applicants must be compliant with sound engineering practice. Not, it doesn't say standards, it said engineering practice as reflected in the 4 publications that are listed in there: ADA, Department of Transportation, American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So I think you're zeroing in on the issue, which is the site distances to the right and the left. Are they, in the planning board, granting a waiver for those, given the numbers that you've heard tonight, numbers that are in the document itself, whether that is clearly contrary to what the planning board should have done in this case?
Opinions from the board. Steve, I know you want to defer right now, but opinions. Do you think it's clearly contrary? Should this waiver have been given, yes or no?
I don't think it should have.
It's very rare to get a waiver or a variance. It's very rare, I think.
Thoughts? 3? I got 2 no's.
Because if you want something done, you have to go through the proper channels and change that variance or.
Should take out, yeah, I get it. What's your thought? Yes or no?
I think it's pretty, the distance going left, I think, is.
The problem.
Yeah.
You're saying no. Bruce?
Feel the same way. Going to the left, that distance is pretty short, really.
Steve?
I don't think it's clearly contrary.
I think it is. All right, I'm going to take a vote. Who thinks that this granting of the variance based on the numbers that we've heard is clearly contrary to the ordinance? 4-1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. And I see your point. We're not anti-development. We're here as a catch-all to review decisions made by agencies, boards. It's nothing against you, it's nothing against the city, but 5 people seem to think that granting this variance was beyond the scope. And that's the decision of the board. I'd ask Tim to write up a decision so I can sign it with appropriate findings based on what we've discussed, including the statute. It'll take a week or two, maybe it's Thanksgiving, I don't need it anytime soon.
Thank you.
Friday would be nice.
No, he's busy. If you could get with me within 30 days,
So just a clarifying question, it sounded to me like the consensus was that it was the left
left
side
side.
distance.
Left side. We find everything, I would find that the granting of the variance for the 211 was fine. It's the shorter distance, it just seems too short, and it's too contrary to the statute. And I agree with Steve, my esteemed colleagues, that that's not what we want our planning board doing. This is case-specific.
And the vertical component too, really.
I get it. So, we are going to grant your appeal, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, the decision will be on my desk within a month. I will sign it and ship it to everybody. I don't think everybody has to sign it, do they?
No, just you'd circulate it, make sure it reflects, what everybody's.
But I'd ask for appropriate findings to support our conclusions. You were here, you heard what we heard. And with that, I vote to adjourn.
Sign and die.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nobody had any other business, did they?
Sign and die.
Sign and die.
Forever. Thank you.